Part 1. The alarm bells rang through the crystal halls of the Velkin Command Center. Council Leader Jara stood before the massive viewing screen, watching as thousands of red dots moved closer to her homeworld. Each dot represented an enemy ship. Each ship carried death. The Chromath swarm had been destroying everything in its path for 3 weeks now. 17 Velkin colonies had fallen silent. Billions of lives had been consumed by the biological horrors that made up the swarm. Now they were coming for Velkara Prime, the capital world of the entire Republic. Jara's hands shook as she gripped the edge of her command table. She had been a council leader for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her military advisors had already told her the truth. The Velkin fleet could not stop the swarm. Their weapons were too weak. Their ships were too few. They had maybe 18 hours before the enemy reached their world. "How many civilians have we evacuated?" Jara asked her assistant. "Only 2 million, Council Leader. The transport ships cannot move fast enough. We still have 8 billion people on the surface." Jara closed her eyes. 8 billion souls depending on her to save them. But how could she save them when their military had already failed? Her chief military officer, Commander Vex, approached with his head lowered in shame. "Council Leader, I must speak plainly. We cannot win this battle. Our fleet will be destroyed within the first hour of engagement. The Chromath will then descend upon our world and consume everything. There must be something we can do," Jara said desperately. "Some weapon we have not tried. Some ally we have not called." Vex was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke the words that Jara had been dreading. "There is one possibility. The humans." The word hung in the air like poison. Humans. The Deathworlders from Earth. The barbaric species that had only recently joined galactic civilization. The Velkin Republic had been one of the loudest voices calling for humanity to be isolated and contained. Jara remembered the speeches she had given at the Galactic Council. She had called humans dangerous. She had said they were too aggressive, too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted. She had voted against every human proposal for trade and cooperation. The entire Velkin government had treated Earth and its people with contempt. "The humans hate us," Jara said quietly. "We have insulted them at every opportunity. Why would they help us now?" "Because they are humans," Vex replied. "I have studied their history, Council Leader. I have read their stories and watched their cultural broadcasts. Humans have a strange quality that other species lack. When someone calls for help, they answer. Even their enemies. Even those who have wronged them." Jara turned to look at her officer. "You are asking me to beg the Deathworlders for salvation, to admit that our supposedly superior civilization needs rescue from the primitives we have mocked." "I am asking you to save our people," Vex said firmly. "Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford." Jara looked around the command center. Every face showed the same fear and desperation. They all knew the truth. Without help, they would all die. Their families would die. Their entire civilization would be erased from the galaxy. She thought about her daughter, who was currently sheltering in an underground bunker with millions of other civilians. She thought about her grandson, only 3 years old, who did not understand why the sky had turned dark with enemy ships. She thought about all the children of Velkara Prime who deserved a chance to grow up. "Send the distress signal," Jara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Broadcast it on all human communication frequencies. Tell them we need immediate military assistance. Tell them we are willing to negotiate any terms." The communications officer hesitated. "Council Leader, what if they refuse? What if they ignore our call?" "Then we will die knowing we tried everything," Jara replied. She straightened her posture and forced strength into her voice. "Send the signal now. Address it to the human military command. Make it clear that this is an emergency." The officer nodded and began working at his console. Within minutes, the signal was ready. Jara stepped forward to record the message herself. "To the military forces of humanity," she began, fighting to keep her voice steady. "This is Council Leader Jara of the Velkin Republic. Our civilization faces imminent destruction from the Chromath swarm. Our defenses have failed. Our fleet is scattered and broken. We have approximately 18 hours before our capital world falls. We are formally requesting immediate military intervention. We know that our two peoples have had difficulties in the past. We know that the Velkin Republic has not been friendly to humanity. But I am begging you now, not as a council leader to another government, but as one living being to another. Please help us. Please save our people. We will agree to any terms you demand. Just please do not let 8 billion innocent lives be consumed by this horror." The message was sent into the void of space, traveling at faster than light speed toward human territory. Now there was nothing to do but wait and pray that the Deathworlders would show mercy. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The Chromath swarm continued its approach. Velkan military officers tried desperately to organize some kind of defense, but everyone knew it was hopeless. The few remaining Velkan warships formed a thin line between the swarm and their homeworld, knowing they would be swept aside like leaves in a storm. Jara sat in her command chair, watching the tactical display. The red dots grew larger as they approached. 12 hours until contact, then 11, then 10. Council leader, the communications officer suddenly shouted. We are receiving a response. It's from human space. Jara jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Play it immediately. The viewing screen changed to show a human male in a dark military uniform. He had gray hair and sharp blue eyes. His face was stern but not cruel. Behind him, Jara could see the bridge of what was clearly a military vessel. This is Admiral Kyle Morrison of the United Nations Starfleet, commanding the Third Fleet. We have received your distress call. Council Leader Jara. The Third Fleet is currently preparing for immediate jump to your location. We will arrive in approximately 12 hours. Hold your position and prepare to coordinate with our forces. Help is on the way. Morrison out, the message ended. For a moment, there was complete silence in the command center. Then someone started crying. Then someone else. Within seconds, half the officers were weeping with relief. Jara felt her own eyes fill with tears. The humans were coming. The Deathworlders were coming to save them. Despite everything the Velkans had said and done, humanity had answered their call. How long until the human fleet arrives? She asked. 11 hours and 40 minutes, Council Leader. They will arrive just before the Chromath reach our outer defense perimeter. It would be close. Terrifyingly close. But for the first time in weeks, Jara felt hope blooming in her chest. The humans were coming. The galaxy's most feared warriors were coming to fight for Volcara Prime. She just prayed they would arrive in time. Part 2 Admiral Kyle Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Endeavour, the largest warship in humanity's Third Fleet. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, preparing the fleet for combat jump. The Velkan distress call played on repeat in his mind. Admiral, all ships report ready for jump, Commander Lisa Grant said from her position at the tactical station. She was a capable officer who had served with Morrison for 8 years. We can begin the sequence on your order. Morrison nodded slowly, his eyes on the star map that showed the Velkan system. It was deep in what had been considered secure space, far from any known threats. The Chromath swarm had changed that calculation drastically. Lieutenant Jake Sullivan, the young officer manning the communications console, cleared his throat. Sir, I have to ask, are we really doing this? The Velkans have treated us like garbage since first contact. They called us primitives. They tried to block our trade agreements. They vote against us in every Galactic Council session. Morrison turned to face his crew. He could see the same question on many faces. Why should humanity risk its ships and lives for people who had shown them nothing but contempt? I know what you're all thinking, Morrison said calmly. The Velkans have not been our friends. They have insulted us and worked against our interests at every turn. But I want you all to remember something. We are not going to Volcara Prime for their government. We are going for the 8 billion civilians who are about to die, men, women, and children who never did anything to hurt us, who probably do not even understand why their leaders hate humans so much. He paused, making sure every crew member was listening. My father was a firefighter back on Earth. He worked in Seattle for 30 years. He once told me about a call he responded to. A house was burning, and the owner was a man who had been openly rude to my father for years. Someone who had made life difficult for him. But when that house caught fire, my father did not hesitate. He ran inside and saved that man's family. You know what he told me afterward? He said that when someone needs help, you help them. You do not check if they like you first. You do not ask if they deserve it. You just help. Lisa smiled slightly. So we're going because it's the right thing to do. Exactly, Morrison confirmed. And because if we turn our backs on those 8 billion people, what does that make us? Just another species willing to let innocent beings die for political reasons. I did not join the military to be that person, and I do not think any of you did either. Around the bridge, Morrison could see his words having an effect. Shoulders straightened. Expressions became more determined. This was why he loved serving with humans. They could be angry and frustrated, but when it came down to it, They usually chose to do the right thing. Besides, Morrison added with a slight grin, the Galactic Council needs to learn something about humanity. When someone sends out a distress call, we answer. Always. Maybe after today, they will understand us better. All ships are standing by for your command, Admiral, Lisa reported. Then let's go save some lives, Morrison said. Initiate fleet jump. Destination, Velcara Prime. The Endeavor's jump drives powered up with a deep thrumming sound that Morrison could feel in his bones. Around them in space, 26 other capital ships and 43 destroyers did the same. This was not humanity's entire military, but it was a significant portion of their naval strength. The jump itself took only seconds. One moment they were in human space, the next they had crossed dozens of light years and emerged near Velcara Prime. The tactical display immediately lit up with contacts. Sensor scan complete, Jake reported. I'm reading the Velcan homeworld dead ahead. Multiple Velcan ships in scattered defensive positions. And Admiral, the Chromath swarm is approximately 9 hours out. The size of that swarm is larger than intelligence estimated. I count over 4,000 enemy vessels. Morrison studied the display carefully. 4,000 ships was a massive force. The Chromath were biological vessels, grown rather than built, and they operated with a hive mind mentality. Each ship was essentially a living creature, filled with smaller organisms ready to swarm and consume anything organic. Open a channel to Velcara Prime, Morrison ordered. Let them know we are here. A moment later, the view screen showed a tall, slender alien with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Morrison recognized her from the distress call. Council Leader Jara looked exhausted and frightened. Admiral Morrison, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You actually came. I was not certain you would. You sent a distress call, Morrison replied simply. That is all we needed to hear. Now, Council Leader, I need you to pull all your remaining ships back to a defensive perimeter around your orbital stations. My fleet will establish an outer defensive line and engage the Chromath before they reach your world. You will fight for us? Jara seemed unable to believe what she was hearing. Even after everything we have done? Morrison's expression softened slightly. Council Leader, we can discuss politics and past grievances after we have dealt with the immediate threat. Right now you have 8 billion people who need protecting, and my fleet is here to do exactly that. Can you provide us with all your tactical data on the Chromath? Movement patterns, weapon capabilities, anything that might help? Yes, of course, Jara said quickly, signaling to someone off-screen. We are transmitting everything we have. Admiral, I must tell you, the Chromath ships are extremely resistant to energy weapons. Our lasers and particle beams barely damage them. They have some kind of biological armor that absorbs energy attacks. Good to know, Morrison said, making a mental note. We will adjust our tactics accordingly. Keep your people calm, Council Leader. We are going to get through this. The transmission ended and Morrison turned to his crew. You all heard that. Energy weapons are not effective. Lisa, I want all ships to switch to kinetic weapons primary. Load railguns with armor-piercing rounds. We are going to punch holes in these biological bastards the old-fashioned way. Yes, sir, Lisa responded, already relaying orders to the fleet. Jake looked up from his console. Admiral, the Velcan tactical data is coming through now. The Chromath use swarm tactics. Overwhelming defenses with sheer numbers. They also deploy some kind of acid weapon that eats through standard hull materials. Then it's a good thing our hulls are not standard, Morrison said. Human warships were built with composite armor designed to handle everything from kinetic impacts to chemical warfare. It was one advantage of coming from a death world. Humans had learned to prepare for every possible threat. The next several hours were spent positioning the fleet and running final weapons checks. Morrison ordered the ships into a formation that would maximize their firing arcs while providing mutual support. He placed the destroyers on the flanks ready to move quickly and exploit enemy weaknesses. The capital ships formed the center line, their heavy railguns pointed toward the approaching swarm. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council, Jake announced. It's marked urgent. Put it through, Morrison said. An alien appeared on the screen, one of the council representatives. Morrison recognized him as Ambassador Trell, who had been particularly vocal about containing human expansion. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council has been monitoring the situation in Velcan space. We urge caution. The Chromath swarm is extremely dangerous. Perhaps it would be wiser to evacuate what civilians you can and retreat. Morrison stared at the ambassador coldly, Are you seriously suggesting we abandon 8 billion people to die? I am suggesting that risking human lives for a species that has shown you nothing but hostility may not be wise, Trell replied. The political ramifications could be significant. Ambassador, with all due respect, I do not take orders from the Galactic Council. I take orders from Earth Command, and they have authorized this mission. We are going to defend Velcara Prime, and we are going to destroy the Chromath Swarm. You can watch and learn something about human values. Morrison out. He cut the transmission before the ambassador could respond. Around the bridge, several crew members were trying not to smile. I think you made your position clear, sir, Lisa said. Someone needed to, Morrison replied. Now let's focus on the mission. How long until the Chromath arrive? 3 hours, Admiral. Morrison settled into his command chair. Then we wait. And when they get here, we show them exactly why you do not threaten innocent people when humans are around. Part 3. The Chromath swarm emerged from faster-than-light travel like a nightmare made real. Thousands of biological ships appeared on the sensor screens, their forms pulsing with sickly green and yellow light. Each vessel was grown rather than built, covered in chitinous armor and lined with orifices that could spray deadly acid. On the bridge of the Endeavour, Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with calm focus. The swarm was organizing itself into attack formations, clearly preparing to overwhelm the human defensive line through sheer numbers. Final count is 4,612 enemy vessels, Jake reported. They range from small fighter-class organisms about 20 meters long to massive cruiser-class beasts over a kilometer in length. The swarm is forming 3 primary attack waves. Fleet status? Morrison asked. All ships report weapons hot and ready. Fighter squadrons are deployed and holding position. Falcon forces have withdrawn to the inner defensive perimeter as ordered. We are ready, sir. Morrison studied the enemy formation. The Chromath were moving with coordinated precision, directed by their hive mind. They had clearly done this many times before, consuming world after world, but they had never faced humanity. Open a general fleet channel, Morrison ordered. When the channel opened, he spoke clearly and firmly. This is Admiral Morrison to all ships. Today we stand between innocent people and certain death. The Chromath swarm thinks they can roll over us like they did the Velcans. They are wrong. We are humans. We come from Earth. We do not break, we do not flee, and we sure as hell do not let bullies hurt people under our protection. Show these creatures what happens when they threaten someone humanity has sworn to defend. All ships weapons free. Engage at will. Across the fleet, weapons came online. Railguns charged. Missile tubes opened. Fighter pilots gripped their controls with determined hands. The Chromath swarm accelerated toward them, and the battle began. First wave is entering range, Lisa called out. Distance closing to 200,000 kilometers. All railguns fire, Morrison commanded. The Endeavour shuddered as its massive kinetic weapons unleashed their power. Solid slugs of tungsten carbide alloy, each weighing several tons, were accelerated to incredible speeds. They shot across space faster than human eyes could follow. When the railgun rounds hit the Chromath vessels, the results were devastating. The biological ships, evolved to handle energy weapons and chemical attacks, had no defense against simple kinetic force delivered at such extreme velocities. The first Chromath vessels literally exploded, torn apart by impacts that transferred enormous amounts of energy in microseconds. Direct hits across the board, Jake shouted. Enemy casualties are heavy. But the swarm did not slow down. This was the horror of fighting a hive mind. Individual losses meant nothing. The Chromath simply flowed around their dead and kept coming, like a wave of living destruction. Second wave is spreading out, Lisa reported. They are trying to flank us. Deploy destroyer squadrons to counter, Morrison ordered. Do not let them get around our formation. Fighter wings. I want you to intercept their flanking elements. Use attack pattern Delta. Human destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward the flanking Chromath ships. These smaller, faster human vessels were perfect for counter-maneuver warfare. They swooped in on the biological ships, their railguns firing in controlled bursts that punched through chitinous armor with brutal efficiency. Meanwhile, the fighter squadrons executed their attack run. 200 human fighters, each piloted by men and women who had trained their entire adult lives for combat, dove into the swarm like hawks among pigeons. They moved in coordinated pairs, one fighter drawing fire while the other struck from an unexpected angle. Captain Peter Hayes led one of the fighter squadrons. He had been born on Mars and had joined the military to see the galaxy. Now he was flying through clouds of enemy bioships, his fighters' weapons blazing. "Blue 3, this is Blue Leader," he called over the squadron channel. "I have 5 bogies on my tail. Could use some help here." "Copy that, Blue Leader. Blue 5 incoming." Another fighter swooped in from above, its cannons tearing into the pursuing Chromath ships. Acid sprayed from the dying vessels, but the human fighters were too fast, already banking away to their next target. "Thanks, Blue 5, Peter said. "Let's regroup and hit their cruiser-class ships. Follow my lead." The squadron reformed and accelerated toward one of the massive Chromath cruisers. These huge biological ships were the backbone of the swarm, each one capable of carrying thousands of smaller organisms that would swarm over a planet's surface. "All fighters, concentrate fire on the cruiser's forward sections," Peter ordered. "Aim for the orifices. That is where they are most vulnerable." The fighters opened fire in unison. Kinetic rounds and missiles slammed into the cruiser's mouth-like openings. The creature ship writhed in space, trying to bring its acid weapons to bear, but the fighters were too small and too quick. They darted around the massive vessel like angry insects, finding every weak point and exploiting it mercilessly. The cruiser's biological armor began to rupture. Green ichor sprayed into space. Finally, something critical was hit, and the entire vessel convulsed before going still. Just another corpse drifting in the void. Back on the Endeavor, Morrison watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The human fleet was performing exactly as he had hoped. The Chromath had numbers, but humans had superior tactics, better weapons, and most importantly, the ability to adapt in real time. "Third wave is committing," Lisa announced. "They are throwing everything at us now." "Good," Morrison said. "Let them come." All capital ships switched to rapid fire mode. "I want a wall of steel between us and them. Nothing gets through." The human capital ships increased their rate of fire. Railguns that had been firing in measured volleys now unleashed a nearly continuous stream of projectiles. The space between the human fleet and the Chromath swarm became a killing field filled with supersonic metal. Chromath ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. But still they came. The hive mind drove them forward with mindless determination, sacrificing thousands to try to reach the human defensive line. "Enemy ships are trying to close to acid weapon range," Jake warned. "They are accepting massive casualties to get closer." "Do not let them," Morrison ordered. "All ships maintain distance. Destroyers, I want you to screen our capitals. If anything gets through, take it down." The battle evolved into a deadly dance. The Chromath pushed forward, and the humans pushed back with overwhelming firepower. Every time the swarm tried a new tactic, the human fleet adapted within minutes. This was what separated humanity from most other species. Humans were not stronger or faster or tougher than everyone else, but they were incredibly good at learning and adjusting. Commander Lisa Grant monitored the tactical situation carefully. "Admiral, we have destroyed approximately 60% of the enemy force. But I am detecting something odd. The remaining Chromath ships are beginning to cluster together. They are forming into one massive formation." Morrison frowned. "What are they doing?" "Unknown, sir. It is not a standard attack formation. They are bunching up, which should make them easier targets." Then Jake's console erupted with warnings. "Admiral, I am reading a massive energy buildup in the center of the Chromath formation. Whatever they are doing, it is big." Morrison leaned forward in his chair, his tactical mind racing. The Chromath were preparing something, some kind of last desperate gamble. "All ships prepare for possible directed energy attack. Angle armor to deflect. Fighter squadrons pull back to safe distance." The clustered Chromath ships began to glow brighter, their bioluminescence intensifying to painful levels. Then as one, they opened their orifices and released a massive cloud of spores into space. "What the hell is that?" Lisa demanded. Jake worked his console frantically. "It is biological weapon, Admiral. Millions of spores, each one containing Chromath genetic material. If those reach Velcara Prime, they will infect the biosphere. The entire planet will become a breeding ground for the Chromath." Morrison's eyes widened. This was the swarm's true objective. They had never intended to win this battle through ship combat. They just needed to get close enough to release their spores. And now those spores were spreading outward in a vast cloud, carried by their initial velocity toward the helpless planet behind the human fleet. "Can our weapons destroy spores?" Morrison asked urgently. "Negative, sir. They are too small and too numerous. Conventional weapons would take hours to clear them all, and by then they would have reached the planet. For the first time since the battle began, Morrison felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. They had won the ship battle, but the Chromath had outmaneuvered them strategically. Those spores would doom Velcara Prime just as surely as the swarm itself would have. But then Morrison remembered something. Something that Earth had dealt with many times throughout its history: biological contamination, plagues, viral outbreaks. Humanity had developed countermeasures over centuries of fighting diseases. "Lisa, do we still have those atmospheric purification drones in Cargo Bay 7? Morrison asked quickly. "Yes, sir. They were being transported to the colony on New Seattle." Why a plan formed in Morrison's mind. It was risky, maybe crazy, but it might just work. "Launch every single drone we have," Morrison commanded. Program. Part 4. The order went out across the entire human fleet within seconds. Every ship began launching every drone and automated device they had. Maintenance drones designed for hull repairs, atmospheric purification units meant for terraforming, even simple cargo movers with basic power systems. Anything that could emit radiation was reprogrammed and deployed. Within 10 minutes, over 30,000 drones were spreading out between the advancing spore cloud and Velcara Prime. Lieutenant Jake Sullivan coordinated their positioning from the Endeavor's bridge, his fingers flying across his console. "Drone network is establishing formation," Jake reported. "They are creating a spherical barrier grid, programming sterilization radiation protocols now." Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display intently. The spore cloud was massive, billions of microscopic organisms drifting through space. Behind it, the remaining Chromath ships were dying under human weapons fire. But the real threat now was those spores. "How long until the spores reach the drone barrier?" Morrison asked. 8 minutes, Admiral." On Velcara Prime, Council Leader Jara watched the same data on her command center screens. She had seen the spore release and understood immediately what it meant. Even if the humans destroyed every Chromath ship, those spores would infect her world. Within weeks, Velcara Prime would become a Chromath breeding ground, and her people would be consumed. But then she saw the human response. Thousands of small craft spreading out in a protective formation. The human admiral was trying something, though she could not understand what. "What are those human vessels doing?" Jara asked her science officer. The officer studied the data carefully. "Council Leader, they appear to be simple drones and maintenance craft. But the humans are programming them to emit radiation. They are creating a sterilization barrier." Jara felt hope flare again. "Will it work? I do not know. We have never tried such a tactic against Chromath spores. But if any species could improvise a solution like this, it would be the humans. They are creative in ways we are not." Back on the Endeavor, Commander Lisa Grant monitored the drone network status. "All drones are in position, Admiral. The barrier is ready. But sir, we have a problem. The radiation levels required to kill the spores will burn out most of the drones within minutes. We will only get one shot at this." Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we better make it count. Jake, I want maximum radiation output the moment those spores enter the barrier zone. Hold nothing back." "Yes, sir." Preparing activation sequence. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. The spore cloud drifted closer, an invisible wave of death. On Velcara Prime, millions of civilians watched their sky, not knowing how close they were to doom. "Spore cloud entering barrier zone in 30 seconds, Jake announced. Morrison gripped the arms of his command chair. Everything depended on the next few moments. If this failed, there was no backup plan. The Velcans would die, and humanity would have failed in its mission to protect them. 20 seconds. Every person on the bridge was holding their breath. Seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Activating. Barrier now. 30,000 drones simultaneously activated their radiation emitters. The space between them lit up with invisible energy, creating a wall of lethal radiation strong enough to sterilize any biological material. The spore cloud hit the barrier and began to die. Billions of Chromath spores were burned away in seconds, their genetic material destroyed by the radiation. But the cloud was enormous and the drones were small. Some spores began to drift around the edges of the barrier, finding gaps in the coverage. "We are getting breakthrough at multiple points," Jake called out. "The barrier is not 100% effective." "Adjust the drone positions," Morrison ordered.
"Fill those gaps."
Jake worked frantically, redirecting drones to cover the weak points. But as Lisa had predicted, The drones were burning out from the intense radiation output. One by one, their power systems failed, creating new gaps in the barrier. "We are losing drones faster than I can compensate," Jake said desperately. "At this rate, 30% of the spore cloud will get through." 30% was still billions of spores. More than enough to infect Velcara Prime. Morrison's mind raced, searching for another solution. Then an idea struck him. A crazy idea that would use resources he really should not waste. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "Lisa, how many missiles do we have left in our magazines?" Lisa checked quickly. "Approximately 12,000 across the fleet, sir. Mostly anti-ship warheads. Can we detonate them inside the spore cloud?" Lisa's eyes widened as she understood his plan. The electromagnetic pulse from the detonations would fry any biological material in the blast radius. "But Admiral, that would leave us with very limited ammunition if another threat appears. Better to face a future threat with low ammunition than to fail the mission right now," Morrison said firmly. "Reprogram all missiles for proximity detonation. I want them to create an overlapping EMP field that covers any spores that get through the barrier." "Yes, sir." Orders went out to the fleet. Within 2 minutes, missiles began launching from every human ship. They streaked toward the spore cloud, thousands of warheads racing to intercept the biological threat. The missiles reached their designated points and detonated in a carefully choreographed sequence. The explosions created massive electromagnetic pulses that swept through the remaining spores, destroying their cellular structures. On the tactical display, Morrison watched as the spore cloud disintegrated. First, the drones killed the bulk of it. Then the missile EMPs cleaned up everything that got through. Within 5 minutes, there was nothing left but dead organic matter that would burn up harmlessly in Velcara Prime's atmosphere. "Spore cloud is neutralized," Jake reported, his voice filled with relief. "Velcara Prime is safe." A cheer erupted on the bridge. Crew members hugged each other, relief washing over them like a wave. They had done it. Against overwhelming odds, they had saved an entire world. Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "Good work, everyone. But we are not done yet." "Jake, what is the status of the remaining Chromath ships?" "Approximately 300 vessels left, Admiral. They are attempting to retreat." Morrison's expression hardened. The Chromath had just tried to commit genocide against 8 billion people. If those ships escaped, they would simply attack another world. He could not allow that. "All ships pursuit course," Morrison ordered. "We are going to hunt down every last one of those vessels. The Chromath swarm ends today here, above Velcara Prime. No survivors, no mercy." The human fleet broke formation and began chasing down the fleeing Chromath ships. The biological vessels were fast, but human ships were faster. One by one, the Chromath were caught and destroyed. Some tried to fight, spraying acid in desperate attacks, but the human armor held. Others tried to hide in the asteroid belt at the edge of the system, but human sensors found them. Captain Peter Hayes and his fighter squadron cornered a group of Chromath vessels trying to escape into deep space. "Blue Squadron, weapons free. Do not let any of them jump away." The fighters swooped in, their guns blazing. The Chromath ships twisted and turned, trying to evade, but there was no escape. One by one, they were reduced to frozen chunks of dead tissue drifting in space. It took 3 hours to hunt down every remaining Chromath vessel. When the last enemy ship was destroyed, Admiral Morrison finally gave the order to stand down. "Secure from battle stations. All ships begin damage assessment and casualty reports." The bridge crew visibly relaxed. They had been at battle stations for nearly 7 hours, and exhaustion was setting in, but they had won. They had achieved a complete victory. Lisa approached Morrison's command chair. "Preliminary casualty reports are coming in, sir. We lost 9 fighters and 2 destroyers took significant damage but are still operational. Total casualties 37 wounded, 9 killed in action." Morrison closed his eyes briefly. 9 dead. 9 families who would receive the worst news possible. 9 lives given to save people who had previously treated humanity with contempt. "Make sure their families know they died as heroes," Morrison said quietly. "They gave their lives protecting 8 billion innocent people. That is the highest calling there is." "Yes, sir." Jake looked up from his console. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Velcara Prime. It is Council Leader Jara. She is requesting to speak with you." Morrison straightened in his chair. "Put her through." The view screen showed Jara, and Morrison was surprised to see tears running down her face. Behind her, the Velkin Command Center was filled with celebrating officers. "Admiral Morrison," Jara said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You saved us. You saved our entire world. I do not have words to express our gratitude." "You do not need to thank us, Council Leader," Morrison replied. "We did what anyone should do when they hear a call for help. We are just glad we arrived in time." "But you lost people," Jara said. "Your own people died fighting for us. After everything we said about humans, after all the insults and the barriers we put in your way, you still came and you still fought for us." Morrison's expression softened. "Council Leader, those 9 people did not die for politics or old grudges. They died protecting innocent lives. That is what humans do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves regardless of past history." Jara nodded, wiping at her tears. Part 5. 2 days after the battle, Admiral Kyle Morrison walked through the streets of Velkara City, the capital of Velkara Prime. Beside him walked Commander Lisa Grant and Lieutenant Jake Sullivan, along with a security detail of 6 Marines. But Morrison suspected the security was unnecessary. Everywhere they went, Velkans stopped to stare. Some bowed respectfully. Others touched their heads to their chests in what Morrison had learned was a Velkan gesture of deep gratitude. Children ran up to offer flowers they had picked, their parents smiling with tears in their eyes. "This is surreal," Jake whispered. 2 weeks ago, these people wanted nothing to do with us. Now they are treating us like saviors." "That is because we are saviors," Lisa replied quietly. "We saved 8 billion lives. That tends to change perspectives." They were being escorted to the Grand Council chamber where a formal ceremony would take place. Council Leader Jara had organized it as a way to publicly thank humanity for their intervention. Morrison had tried to decline, preferring to simply return to his fleet. But Jara had insisted. The Grand Council chamber was an enormous building with crystal walls that refracted light into beautiful patterns. Inside, thousands of Velkans had gathered, filling every seat and lining the walls. When Morrison and his officers entered, the entire assembly rose to their feet. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. Velkans were not naturally loud people, but now they clapped and cheered with abandon. Morrison felt uncomfortable with the attention, but he maintained his professional composure and walked to the platform where Jara waited. The council leader raised her hands, and the crowd gradually quieted. When silence finally fell, she spoke in a clear voice that was broadcast throughout the chamber and across the entire planet. "People of the Velkan Republic, honored guests from Earth, today we gather to recognize an act of extraordinary courage and compassion. 3 days ago, our world faced extinction. The Chromath swarm was hours away from consuming our civilization. Our military had failed. Our defenses had crumbled. We faced the end of everything we had built over thousands of years." Jara paused, her voice thick with emotion. "In our desperation, we sent a distress call to humanity, a species we had insulted, belittled, and worked to exclude from galactic affairs. We had no right to expect their help. We had shown them nothing but contempt. Yet when they received our call, they did not hesitate. Admiral Kyle Morrison mobilized the 3rd Fleet and came to our defense." She turned to face Morrison directly. "Admiral, your fleet fought for 6 hours against overwhelming odds. You destroyed over 4,000 enemy vessels. When the Chromath deployed their spore weapon, you improvised a solution that saved our biosphere. 9 of your people gave their lives protecting strangers who had been unkind to them. That is a debt we can never fully repay." Morrison stepped forward. "Council Leader, if I may speak." "Please, Admiral." Morrison turned to address the assembled Velkans. "I want to be clear about something. The 3rd Fleet did not come here expecting gratitude or payment. We came because it was the right thing to do. When someone sends a distress call, humans answer. It is that simple. We do not check if the people calling for help like us. We do not ask if they have been kind to us in the past. We simply help." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I know that humanity has a reputation as aggressive and dangerous. I know that many species fear us because we come from a harsh world, and we have strong military capabilities. But I want you to understand something about humans. Yes, we can fight. Yes, we are good at warfare, but we fight to protect, not to conquer. We use our strength to defend the weak, not to dominate them." Morrison looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many Velkans as he could. "The same environment that made us tough also made us compassionate. On Earth, survival often depends on cooperation. We learned thousands of years ago that we are stronger when we work together, when we help each other, when we protect those who cannot protect themselves. That lesson is in our bones now. It is who we are." He turned back to Jara. "So please do not think of this as a debt to be repaid. Think of it as the beginning of a friendship. Humans and Velkans working together, that is all we have ever wanted." The applause that followed was even louder than before. Velkans stood and cheered, many of them openly crying. Morrison saw that his words had touched them deeply. After the ceremony, Jara led Morrison and his officers to a private reception room. Away from the crowds, her professional demeanor cracked and she looked exhausted. "Would you like something to drink, Admiral?" she asked. "We have beverages from across the galaxy." "Just water would be fine, thank you," Morrison replied. As they sat, Jara studied Morrison's face. "You truly meant what you said, did you not? About not expecting payment." "Of course," Morrison said. "That is not why we came." "I believe you," Jara said softly. "And that is what shames me most. We judged your entire species based on fear and prejudice. We saw your strength and assumed you would use it to harm others. We never considered that you might use it to protect." She stood and walked to the window, looking out over her city. "Do you know why the Velkan Republic opposed human inclusion in galactic affairs?" "I assume it was because we made you uncomfortable," Morrison replied. "Partly," Jara admitted. "But mainly it was because you reminded us of what we had lost. Velkans were once warriors, Admiral. Thousands of years ago we fought terrible wars among ourselves. We nearly destroyed our own world. When we finally achieved peace, we swore never to be violent again. We built our society on the principle of avoiding conflict at all costs." She turned back to face him. "But in rejecting violence, we also lost something important. We forgot how to stand up for what is right. We became so afraid of fighting that we could not defend ourselves or anyone else. When the Chromath came, we discovered that our peaceful philosophy had made us weak." "Peace is not weakness," Morrison said gently. "The ability to avoid unnecessary conflict is admirable. But you are right that sometimes you have to be willing to fight for what matters." "Humans understand that balance," Jara said. "You are capable of great violence, but you choose to use it only in defense. That is wisdom we lost long ago." Lisa spoke up. "If I may, Council Leader, perhaps this crisis can be an opportunity. The Galactic Council needs members who understand both peace and protection. Maybe humans and Velkans can work together to provide that balance." Jara smiled for the first time since they had entered the room. "I would like that very much, Commander. In fact, I intend to propose exactly that at the next Council session. The Velkan Republic will officially sponsor humanity for full Council membership, and we will work to change the perception of your people throughout the galaxy." "That is generous," Morrison said, "but be prepared for resistance. Many species are afraid of us." "Let them be afraid," Jara said firmly. "Fear can be a starting point for respect. Once other species see humans as we now see you, that fear will transform into admiration. You saved us, Admiral Morrison, not because you wanted something from us, but because it was right. The galaxy needs to know that story." Over the next several hours, Morrison and his officers were taken on a tour of the city. They visited hospitals where wounded Velkan soldiers were recovering, and were thanked repeatedly by people whose lives had been saved. They saw memorials being erected to honor the 9 human casualties, with their names carved in crystal that would last forever. In the evening, they attended a dinner with the entire Velkan Council. The politicians who had once voted against humanity in every council session now competed to show their gratitude. It was overwhelming and slightly awkward, but Morrison handled it with his usual grace. As the dinner wound down, an elderly Velkan counselor approached Morrison. "Admiral, I must confess something to you. I was one of the loudest voices arguing against human involvement in galactic affairs. I gave speeches calling your people dangerous primitives. I voted to restrict your trade and limit your exploration." Morrison waited silently, letting the counselor speak. "I was wrong," the elderly Velkan continued. "Completely and utterly wrong. I judged your entire species based on fear and ignorance. I did not take the time to understand your culture or your values. And now, because of my prejudice, 9 of your people are dead. They died protecting my grandchildren, and I can never make that right." Morrison placed a hand on the counselor's shoulder. "Sir, those 9 people died doing what they believed was right. They volunteered to serve in the military knowing the risks. They would not want you to carry guilt over their sacrifice. Instead, honor them by working to build better relationships between our peoples. Make sure their deaths mean something. The counselor nodded, tears in his eyes. I swear to you, Admiral, for the rest of my life, I will work to ensure that humans and Velkans are true allies. Late that night, Morrison stood on the balcony of his guest quarters, looking up at the stars. Lisa joined him holding 2 cups of coffee. Quite a day, she said, handing him a cup. Quite a week, Morrison corrected with a tired smile. I am going to need a vacation after this. The crew is talking about what happened here, Lisa said. About how we came to help people who did not like us and how it changed everything. They are proud of what we did. They should be, Morrison replied. Part 6. 3 months after the Battle of Velkara Prime, the Galactic Council convened for its quarterly session. The massive chamber on the neutral station of Unity Hold was filled with representatives from over 200 species. Admiral Kyle Morrison sat in the human delegation section, wearing his dress uniform and feeling distinctly uncomfortable. Beside him sat Ambassador Helen Carter, Earth's chief diplomatic representative. She was a sharp woman in her 60s who had spent her career negotiating humanity's place in galactic society. Until now, that place had been marginal at best. Nervous? Helen whispered. I am a military officer, not a politician, Morrison replied quietly. I would rather face another Chromath swarm than give a speech to this assembly. Helen smiled. Just be yourself, Admiral. That is what won over the Velkans. It will work here too. At the front of the chamber, Council Chairman Vorath called the session to order. He was a tall crystalline being, whose species had helped found the Galactic Council 5,000 years ago. His voice resonated through the chamber with natural authority. We have much business to attend to today, Vorath announced. But first we must address a matter that has captured the attention of the entire galaxy. The Velkan Republic has submitted a formal proposal to grant humanity full council membership with voting privileges. A murmur ran through the assembly. Many species had been expecting this given the news from Velkara Prime, but it was still controversial. Humans had been in galactic society for only 30 years. Most species waited centuries before being granted full membership. Council leader Jara stood in the Velkan section. She looked different from the frightened leader Morrison had first met during the crisis. Now she stood tall and confident, her voice strong as she addressed the council. Honorable Chairman, distinguished representatives, I speak today about a matter of profound importance. 3 months ago, my world faced extinction. The Chromath swarm had destroyed 17 of our colonies and was bearing down on Velkara Prime itself. Our military was shattered. Our defenses were failing. 8 billion civilians awaited certain death. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle on the assembly. In our desperation, we sent a distress call to humanity. A species we had consistently opposed in this very chamber. A species we had called dangerous and primitive. We had no right to expect their help. Yet Admiral Kyle Morrison mobilized an entire fleet and traveled dozens of light years to defend us. Jara's voice grew stronger. The human Third Fleet fought for 7 hours against overwhelming odds. They destroyed over 4,000 enemy vessels. When the Chromath deployed a biological weapon that would have infected our entire biosphere, the humans improvised a solution that saved our world. 9 human soldiers gave their lives protecting Velkans they had never met. Ambassador Trell, the same official who had urged Morrison to retreat during the battle, stood up. He was a reptilian creature from a species known for their calculating nature. Council leader Jara, no one denies that humanity acted admirably in this instance. But one good deed does not erase concerns about their aggressive tendencies. Humans come from a Class 12 death world. They are naturally violent. Naturally violent. Jara's voice took on an edge. Ambassador, the humans had every reason to ignore our distress call. We had insulted them repeatedly. We had worked against their interests. Yet they came without hesitation. They risked their lives for strangers. Is that violence or is that courage? Another representative stood, a being made of flowing energy. The question is not whether humans can do good things. The question is whether they can be trusted with power. What happens when their interests conflict with other species? Will they use their military might to impose their will? Chairman Vorath gestured to Morrison. Perhaps we should hear from the humans themselves. Admiral Morrison, would you address the council? Morrison stood slowly, feeling hundreds of alien eyes upon him. He walked to the speaking platform, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. For a moment he just stood there gathering his thoughts. I'm not a diplomat, Morrison began. I'm a soldier. I have spent 40 years in the service of my species, and I have learned some hard truths about power and responsibility. So I am going to speak plainly, and I hope you will forgive my lack of diplomatic polish. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. You are right to be cautious about humanity. We are strong. We have powerful weapons and advanced military technology. We come from a world that would kill most of you within hours. And yes, we are good at warfare. Very good. Morrison saw several representatives nodding as if he was confirming their worst fears. But he continued. But here is what you need to understand about humans. That same harsh world that made us strong also taught us the value of cooperation. On Earth, survival has always depended on working together. Our ancestors learned that the tribe that shared resources and protected each other survived, while those who fought among themselves perished. That lesson is embedded in our culture now. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You ask what happens when human interests conflict with other species. I will tell you. We negotiate. We compromise. We find solutions that work for everyone. Because that is what intelligent beings do. The ability to resolve conflicts without violence is not weakness. It is wisdom. Ambassador Trell spoke up again. But you maintain a powerful military. Why, if not to impose your will? We maintain a military to protect those who cannot protect themselves, Morrison replied firmly. To deter aggression. To respond when peaceful species send distress calls because violent species are trying to destroy them. That is why the Third Fleet exists. Not to conquer, but to defend. A small furry representative from a pacifist species stood up. Admiral Morrison, my people are deeply opposed to violence of any kind. We find the very concept of warfare abhorrent. How can we trust a species that not only accepts violence but excels at it? Morrison nodded respectfully. I understand your position, but let me ask you something. When the Chromath came for Velcara Prime, could your philosophy have stopped them? Could peaceful words have turned aside 4,000 warships intent on genocide? The small being was silent. I am not saying your values are wrong, Morrison continued. Peace is always preferable to war, but sometimes evil does not respond to peaceful overtures. Sometimes the only way to protect innocent lives is to stand between them and those who would harm them. That requires strength. That requires the willingness to fight. He turned to address the entire assembly. Humanity does not want war. We do not seek conflict, but we will not stand by while innocent beings are slaughtered. If that makes us dangerous in your eyes, then so be it. But ask yourselves this. Would you rather live in a galaxy where the strong protect the weak or one where the strong simply prey upon them? Another representative stood, this one from a species known for their logical thinking. Admiral, your words are compelling, but actions speak louder than words. What guarantee do we have that humanity will continue to act as protectors rather than conquerors? You have no guarantee, Morrison said bluntly. You have to trust us just as we have to trust you. That is what civilization is built on. Trust, mutual respect, the willingness to give others the benefit of the doubt. He gestured toward Jara. The Velkans did not trust us. They feared us and worked against us. But when they needed help, we came anyway. We proved ourselves through action. That is all any species can do. Show through consistent behavior that you can be trusted. Helen Carter stood and joined Morrison at the platform. If I may add something, Admiral. The human government is prepared to make a formal pledge. We will commit to using our military only in self-defense or in response to legitimate requests for assistance. We will submit our military deployments to Council oversight. We will work within galactic law and respect the sovereignty of all member species. Pretty words, Ambassador Trell said skeptically. But what stops you from breaking those pledges if it serves your interests? The same thing that stops any species from breaking their word, Morrison replied. Honor. Integrity. The knowledge that our reputation depends on keeping our promises, and the understanding that betraying the trust of the galactic community would be self-destructive. He stepped forward, his voice growing more passionate. You want to know what kind of species humans are? Let me tell you about the 9 people who died at Velcara Prime. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was a fighter pilot from Mexico. She left behind a husband and 2 children. Ensign Paul Johnson was 23 years old and had been in the fleet for less than a year. He was going to get married in 3 months. Corporal Linda Washington was a maintenance technician who volunteered to pilot one of the drones we used to stop the Chromath spores. She knew it was a one-way mission and she went anyway. Morrison's voice grew thick with emotion. These people did not die for political gain or territorial expansion. They died because they believed that protecting 8 billion innocent lives was worth the sacrifice. That is what humanity values. That is who we are. And if you cannot trust a species that acts on those values, then I do not know what more we can offer you." The chamber fell silent. Morrison stood there, breathing hard, feeling like he had just fought another battle.